What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions of Pentiment, the narrative game from Obsidian that just released yesterday from the time of this video. And to kick this off, I do need to inform people that while I did get a review copy of this game, it was right before the game launched, like literally 5 to 6 hours maybe. But to be clear, Microsoft did provide me with a review copy of this nonetheless. But with that out of the way, let's actually talk first impressions of this game as I move to review the title. For those completely unaware, this is a narrative game from Obsidian. Narrative games, as I like to call them, are big on the story. There's not a lot of combat, not a ton of exploration in the traditional sense, and sometimes you'll hear them referred to as visual novels, and in some ways, they play kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure book, and that's largely what we have here. So that's probably the first and most important thing to know about the game, because as such, it is very heavy on text and reading, which means if you're not into those things, you're probably not going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this game because that's most of what this game is. That said, though, they have a lot of really cool stuff surrounding that I wanted to talk about. For starters, there's tons of accessibility options just around that in general, such as being able to simplify the fonts to make them easier to read, text-to-speech options up to 50% enlargement of the text itself, and then they also did a lot of cool stylistic things with it, such as the font of the person speaking being based on their station in life, really, and when they're really emphasizing a word and showing off the emotion that someone's giving, the specific word with the emotion will often have like little ink splatters around it, or it'll shake. Sometimes there are initial errors in the font when someone less intelligent is talking, and you can even see the intensity of the font change as theoretically someone would be dipping their quill in ink to keep writing. So just a lot of really cool stuff around the font. But what about the rest of the game? Well, we play as Andreas Mahler, probably butchering that pronunciation, as I will likely do with most of the things in this game. But we play our character in 16th century Bavaria. And over the course of 25 years, actually, we'll be investigating a series of murders, all centered around one small community. Now, there is a decent amount of choice and consequence in this game. As you play through the tutorial, you'll pick various backgrounds and studies that your character had undertaken previously, which will give them extra options in dialogue, that kind of thing. But in addition to this, there's also a time system. You'll only be able to fit so many activities into a day, which forces you to choose between a variety of activities to complete your investigation with, and then after so many days, you're kind of forced forward. So while you have all the time to choose what you want to do, you're only going to be able to do so many things. And I can honestly say that choosing which things to do has been somewhat challenging because the story is very engrossing. I think the first couple hours get off to a bit of a slow start as the game is explaining systems and mechanics to you, which can be a little bit dry. But once you get past that and you're free to explore and talk to people a little bit, the story picks up and I was very involved. It was actually a little hard to put this game down just to make this video, which is exactly what you want from a narrative game where the story is the game. And I think what really helps sell this in terms of my initial impressions is that the setting itself seems to be as much the main character as your main character. The community and the people within it seem to be very fleshed out. There was obviously a bunch of research that went into this. And again, as I described earlier with the fonts and everything that change with how people are speaking, their own backgrounds, all combines to make a world that somehow feels alive despite the heavy stylization in the art style. But I would tell you though, while that's the bulk of my first impressions, there are a couple of minor things that have kind of annoyed me a little bit. The menu UI for your journal is a bit atrocious, to be honest. I'm sure some people like it, but it's just way too busy for my taste. A little hard to understand what I was actually looking at for quite some time, and then even once you get used to it, it still feels clunky to navigate. And then in addition to this, while we're exploring, we're mostly obviously in these 2D backgrounds, which I'm sure you've seen up to this point. And sometimes various things you can interact with are so close to one another that as you move to them and they activate, it's easy to misclick something, which is especially true when there's a person to talk to right next to an exit of an area, which makes it kind of annoyingly easy to either skip to an area you didn't mean to or talk to someone when you were trying to leave, that kind of thing, which is, again, an incredibly minor complaint. But to wrap this up and save some for the review, overall, I'm enjoying Pentiment. If you go into it knowing what you're getting, I think you'll enjoy it. As most people were aware, this was a passion project from Obsidian and more specifically probably Josh Sawyer, and that really shines through. There's clearly a lot of love put into this game and even tiny details that make a huge difference. And while I don't think this particular game is going to change anybody's mind about this genre of game, I do think that what I've seen so far is really impressive. Now, in terms of the review, this likely won't take me long. I usually 100% these games before I review them. Realistically, you're probably looking at Friday or Saturday before I get the proper review up, so this should not take me long at all. So I hope you're looking forward to the full review, but my initial impressions are relatively positive, a couple minor issues here, but the story is interesting, the setting is interesting, and those are the two primary things you want from a game like this. Again, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.